This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, everyone. Finally, a Main Street upgrade presentation to share with the community. The plans that have been worked on for several months very diligently by a group of members from our community who have given a considerable amount of time and many meetings to bring us to where we are this evening. I want to particularly recognize and thank the 21 members and the many support people that made up the team that worked on the Main Street Reconstruction Focus Group. These are all people from our community. They represented and came out of various organizations. Very consistent with something that was done, I think, many years ago in 1999, when a similar effort was made to create a mobility plan for Lake Placid that at the time did not go to fruition, partly because of funding questions. But here we are, and I'm happy to introduce this evening Dean Dietrich, who is chairman of the Lake Placid North Elba Development Commission. The Dean will be leading us through this presentation and the various slides and steps. So with that said, sit back and enjoy the show, folks. We're looking forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank all of you for attending. I'm looking at a lot of initials on the board, so it would be much nicer to see your faces. But each one of those initials represents a person who's very interested in Lake Placid, and you truly are our real resource. We talk about natural resources, but you are the human resource that keeps the quality of life going, the quality of life we enjoy here in Lake Placid. So thank you for attending. I would also like to take a moment to thank Orta for supplying the venue. We thought it'd be a little fuller than this. Of course, some things have changed. And we thank Roost also for supplying the technology and helping us with that support. You could have the next slide, please. Tonight's goal is to provide some information to you and to give you an opportunity to ask questions. So the most important part of this presentation is probably the Q&A at the end. And we have some expert members of the design team to answer your question. In order to get there, however, we are going to take about 25 or 30 minutes, and I will provide a brief overview of the project. Hopefully that will focus your questions. One of the things that you can do with this type of approach is you can submit your questions via the chat function on your screen. And so as we are going through a different part of this presentation, feel free to send a chat and our operators will take your calls. So we'll be okay there. The project, as Mayor Randall said, the project roots go way back. And the 1996-99 plan came out of the 96 comprehensive plan. And the 1996 comprehensive plan and the 2014 comprehensive plan both called for improvements to the water lines and the infrastructure along Main Street. They both recognized that Mirror Lake was a gem that needed continuing polishing. And they both realized that the economic vitality of Main Street was essential to the economy of not only Lake Placid, but the entire area. The 1996 plan in particular found out that the water lines were about 100 years old then and started looking at ways to finance improvements that we knew were coming down the road. In 2014, while we were putting that comprehensive plan together, we realized that the Uniform Fire Code was adding or increasing the requirements for sprinkler systems, and our water lines, particularly the hookups, were not going to be sufficient to enable those systems to come online in Main Street. Of course, both those plans always talked about mobility, pedestrian accessibility to the Main Street corridor and traveling. Both plans, again, talked about Mirror Lake. The 96 plan was really more concerned with point pollution, gum wrappers, and in those days it was styrofoam containers from McDonald's and cigarette butts and motor oil. The 2014 plan, if you read that, kind of switched a little bit toward we realized that salt was starting to impact our lake. And in 1996, the comprehensive plan called for increasing the aesthetics of Main Street. And one of the things that came out of that was the beautification committee, which has worked, and the appearance committee, which have worked diligently since then to improve the aesthetics of Main Street. And also in 2014, a new thing came up, and that was basically a number of residents in the public meetings for the 2014 plan talked about light pollution. And we've made efforts to reduce light pollution also. And of course, all plans say we have to maintain financial responsibility. You can't do anything which is not fiscally responsible. This particular project was the result of a great deal of collaboration. If you're looking at your computers at home, you are looking at a fairly lengthy list of stakeholders. Mayor Randall contacted each of those stakeholder groups and asked each one of them, please send a representative to a focus group. And that's where the 21 people that Mayor Randall alluded to come from. And that group then met with the design team, looked at the proposals. Then they went back to their individual groups, presented to their individual groups who made suggestions, and then came back to the design team and revisions were made to the plan. That process occurred at least 4 times that I can recall, and probably more than that. So there were a number of revisions that took place based on all the input from these groups. And so a few things happened. Starting in 1996, the village started looking for funding. And that finally happened, and they were able to obtain the funding and move forward. The focus group met with the design team and came up with a preliminary plan. So if you look at this slide, the first 2 steps are checked. We can almost check the bid construction process, because as we know, very recently the bids went out. Each contractor was asked to submit 2 bids. What would be the cost if you worked without interruption, started construction, ended construction, and worked as many days as you could, barring the winter break? The other bid went out saying, nope, no work during the summer season. So you would just work in the spring and the fall as far into the winter as you could. Obviously, they came up with 2 different costs, and the village just awarded the bid that does not include construction during the summer. So that means that the estimated time frame for the project now becomes spring of 2021, and it goes through the spring and fall construction seasons and ends in the fall of 2023. Now that that is in place, we can start to work on mobility plans. What will we do in the summer? What will we do during the construction season? We can start working on communication plans and marketing plans. And that will take us to the pre-bid construction process. Then, of course, the construction will begin, and it'll be post-construction. I'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to handle those problems of mobility, the strategy, I should say, to handle those problems of mobility and communication in a later slide. Whenever the design team met, there are also parameters, there are also design limitations. First of all, you only have so much money. You can't do everything you want to do. And the grant funding for the infrastructure, the stormwater management system, calls for a green infrastructure, which means there must be a certain amount of vegetation included in the plan, and they must take advantage of soils to filter the stormwater. Of course, Main Street is also State Route 86, and the New York Department of Transportation weighed in, and they had their own requirements, the things that they wanted to see taking place on a state road. As I mentioned, we knew there were fire safety standards we have to meet, and of course, whenever you do anything on Main Street, anything pedestrian or has to do with mobility, you have to meet the Americans with Disability Act requirements. So the challenge between the design team and the focus group was to stay within those parameters and still maintain the benefits that we see coming from this project. And so this project then, within the parameters, within the confines of the fiscal parameters and the requirements we talked about, will still improve the way Main Street operates and flows. It will still help Main Street to be safer. It will still protect the environment. It will keep Main Street a place where visitors and residents want to return to. It will make the streetscape more user-friendly, accessible, age-friendly. It will keep the character of the town. It will maintain the architectural characteristics of the town, and it will do it in a fiscally responsible manner. The project is basically two parts. Most of the work actually is undertaken subsurface. Most of the cost of the project is to dig up the surface, replace water lines and stormwater system. Now, of course, you can upgrade those areas, and then when you put the surface back down, the idea is to make what you put down better than what you tore up. So it upgrades that. Hence, we look at this as an upgrade project. We are increasing the capacity of the stormwater and the water lines, and at the same time, enhancing the surface area. So to the project itself, the area that's going to be dug up is on this, you can see on the slide. It starts on the south end, which is the right side of the slide, with the Main Street parking area. And if you look there, you can kind of see the Adirondack Community Church and the post office. It continues along Main Street to the north. Main Street basically runs to the north until it gets to 1 Main on the left-hand side of the slide, the green area on the left-hand side of the slide, turns up Sarah Placid Avenue and goes a little bit past what's currently the High Peaks. And that area is all going to be dug up. So that's where the new stormwater system goes. That's where the new surface area is placed. It does include, if you look at that, the central parking area, and we will talk about that. But the project actually affects everything in the bottom part of that slide too. For all the water coming off of Hillcrest, all the water going down Sarah Placid Ave, Margaret Place, Hayes Street, and Olympic Drive is captured by the stormwater basins in that particular area. The stormwater management system that captures that water in 3 locations. There are 3 main catchment basins or catch areas, and they're kind of hard to see on this. One is on the Main Street. You can see the blue section on the Main Street, the large parking lot. There's another blue area by the central lot, and another one on 1 Main. So these are basically big bins that fill with water, and they allow the water to filter out the bottom. If there is ever a major surge and the bins get filled, then there is an overflow system that takes the overflow water out toward the Chubb River. So basically what happens then is all the water, the soils filter the water and allow it to eventually flow into Mirror Lake. This does what we want it to do. First of all, it picks up all the point pollution. It picks up the motor oil. None of that can get through the soils. One thing that we should be concerned with, need to continue to be concerned with, it does not take out the salt out of the water. Once salt is dissolved in water, it's a very expensive process. It's a very energy intense process to separate the salt from the water. It still helps Mirror Lake, however. If you can envision a storm surge, a lot of salt is being washed into the lake at once. And that shocks the ecosystem and makes it a little bit harder for all the biological functions of the lake to occur. By catching all that water and filtering it through the soils, it means there's a more even flow of salt and there's less stress on the biosphere of Mirror Lake. It does not, again, one more time, the only way we can stop salt from going into Mirror Lake is to reduce the amount of salt we put in the Mirror Lake watershed, because water gets to the lake one way or another. But it does mitigate, it takes care of a lot of the point pollution and also mitigates the impacts of that. Moving along then, if we start on the south end of the construction area, you are looking at the main parking lot with the post office and the Adirondack Church, also indicated by the tan structures. This area does not do a large number of changes, but there is an infiltration system you can see on the far south end of the lot. The green area, the open space area is increased, and some of that area becomes semi-permeable. And so the idea here is we do a few things. We do work into the stormwater management system. It also keeps the parking essentially the same, and at the same time, the crosswalks are moved slightly to enhance pedestrian safety. There are not a lot of changes to grades or other parts of this section. Basically, we all know for years, and we still are hoping for more improvements. And the idea is to put the improvements we need in this area, but maintain the flexibility if any future structures are planned. Right. This rendering then shows how the extended green space in the semi-permeable surface can enhance the view of the anchor of the pedestrian area. This is the first thing that a lot of people see as they enter the pedestrian corridor, and of course we want it to look as good as possible. And okay. As you move up the street, then there are bump outs, and they're cleverly called bump outs because they bump out into the roadway. They are the green areas that you see bumping out into the roadway. They have two different functions. The ones to the left, you see there are 4 bump outs that surround the crosswalk. And basically what they do is they improve the sight lines for the pedestrians who are crossing and improve the sight lines for the drivers who are moving along. We've all had that experience where even though pedestrians are crossing at the crosswalks, it appears like they're jumping out between 2 cars. You slam on the brakes, you hope the person doesn't hit you, the person driving behind you doesn't hit you. You get that little shot of adrenaline through your fingers, and then you just say, thank you, I didn't kill anybody. We want to improve the experience for drivers and pedestrians, and the sight lines, although people are still going to do some of the things that people do, it delineates the crosswalks and hopefully mitigates part of that. If you look at the bump outs in the center of that, they're not by crosswalks. And that's again because the filtration system, the water catchment basins, need to have green areas. And that has a lot to do with the grant funding and how they function. If we could. Every bump out, because it has different functions and different locations and different sizes, will be designed slightly differently. But this is what a typical bump out may look like. And you notice that it does improve the sight lines of the crosswalks. It has another purpose, however, that we can also, it gives an opportunity to take some of the obstacles that are on the sidewalk and move them off the pedestrian corridor. So all of as much as possible, the light fixtures, the recycle cans, the parking meters will be placed on bump outs. And so your experience of walking down Main Street will have fewer obstacles. As you look up and down Main Street, you can see these renderings show a little bit of the extra green that is part of this. So there's a bump out on the upper one on the right there. And you can see a little bit more green on the bottom photo also. More importantly, they show smooth surfaces. Main Street is anything but a smooth surface right now. The sidewalks are anything but a smooth surface right now. And improving the surfaces of the roadway and the sidewalk will enhance the pedestrian experience and the driving experience and give everybody a little bit more accessibility. Notice that the planning plans also call for maintaining the views of the architecture, because one of the unique things about walking up and down Main Street is you're walking through the 1920s, 1930s kind of architectural styles. At the north end of Main Street is probably where most of the largest number of changes take place, or the changes that are most visible probably take place. You can see one main park is that green area, and that is pushed out a bit. It is going to be enlarged, and it is going to be enlarged. It needs to be enlarged because that basically to accommodate for a catchment basin for the infiltration on that side of the road. That enlargement does a few things. You notice it realigns the intersection of Mirror Lake Drive, which is coming in from the left, and Main Street, which is turning to the bottom of the slide. So it delineates the traffic flow a little better, and so that will help the traffic pattern. It also means that we can move the sidewalks to locations which are safer and be crossing less traffic. And if we look at this, there are some other things that take place there. The grade, the reason that the project goes up past the high peaks is because the grade is slightly changed. And you can't really, it's hard to tell on this what the original grade is, but basically that grade is changed. We've all seen snow plows, buses, trucks get stuck on their way up Sarah Placid Avenue in the middle of winter, and hopefully this will help solve the problem. You can also see with this rendering, you no longer, as you drive north on Main Street, you no longer look straight down Mirror Lake Drive. It's pretty obvious that it's a different road, and any visitors don't have to worry, which way do I go? Do I go straight or south? And that will help that area. The next slide is a face-on view of the bump out. We talked about having anchors on either side of the pedestrian area. So we have one of the most vibrant and vital main streets because we are a planner's delight. We have a park on the south end. Peacock Park. We have a park which provides access to the middle, and we have an anchor on the north end. And in between that, we have about a half mile of beautiful scenery, a beautiful streetscape. And that is what everybody is searching for in terms of creating a vital pedestrian corridor. And this, we believe, will help increase the vitality of that corridor. And it also, as you see, increases the aesthetic views. I would say, my guess would be that I don't think it's a guess, that the focus group spent a great deal of time on parking. We all understand parking's been a conditional a problem forever in Lake Placid, ever since cars were invented anyway. And one of the changes that will take place are to the small lot. This is referred to as the central lot. I think colloquially it's referred to as the NBT lot, but this is the lot which is by Hayes Street. And this will undergo some changes. It will have some grading changes. Some parking spots are added. The crosswalks are revised for safety reasons to make it easier for pedestrians to cross. And of course, the restrooms can be redone, so we'll have better restrooms. One of the things that the other items is that this does allow for more handicap parking in this area, which is very close to the library, which is something that seniors that were on the focus group felt was very important. So we accommodate some of the needs of our senior citizens that way. The big parking lot does not essentially change. As we said, most of the changes here are the infiltration system, the semi-permeable surface. The parking remains essentially the same as on the big lot. And if we go to the next slide, this is the slide that indicates the total impact on parking. Need to talk about a few things about these numbers. One is the current and proposed numbers are the numbers before construction and after construction. They do not deal with any proposed or any talk about future enhancements. We all know there are talks about future enhancements to the central area and to the main parking lot. They are not included in these figures. The other thing is that all the parking areas in loading zones are included in these figures, and the reason we did that is because the loading zones are really parking areas at the time when Main Street has its peak usage. So these parking areas, this is the maximum number of parking spots that are available at the peak usage times of Main Street. We thought that was a good way to approach it. You do notice that the north section of Main Street, which for our purposes goes from 1 Main to Hayes Street, approximately that area, loses the most parking spots. The central area, which then continues from Hayes down to Marcy, actually gains about 7, and then we lose a few more spots in the south. The numbers in the parking lot actually increase, and I would note that most of those parking lot numbers that increase are the central lot, the smaller lot, which are, if you wanted to put them in the left-hand column, would kind of be between central, be close to where it says central. They're closer to the central north section. If you look at all the changes that take place in the entire construction area, the total change to the number of parking spots is a loss of 3 parking spots. And again, that does not include any future enhancements to the central lot or to the larger lot, which may take place. Loading zones are incredibly important to businesses along Main Street. They are the lifeblood. They serve for shipments, they serve for deliveries, they provide access to the businesses for cleaning services, for fuel delivery services. The proposed loading zones are circled here, and they are essentially not very different from the loading zones that exist today. And the focus group talked to businesses up and down Main Street, and we believe these loading zones will provide the accesses that we talked about that are needed to all the businesses along Main Street. It should be noted also that these loading zones are very flexible. It's, you know, if we find the loading zones are insufficient, it's pretty easy to paint some more lines or move them from one location to another. That happens all the time as the needs of the businesses along Main Street change. And the other thing is loading zones are flexible in terms of time policies. So as I said, the loading zones are designed to be available for parking during the peak times, simply because the sign says you're a loading zone at some points in time and not a loading zone at other points in time. We all know that getting to the end, doing the things we just talked about, will be disruptive. And all of us know this from our personal experience. Anyone who has remodeled a kitchen, put new flooring down, knows that it's a disruptive process. And now that we know the construction plan, we can start to take more steps to mitigate and to soften that disruption as much as possible. We have a preliminary traffic plan. We talked a lot about parking and mobility and transportation plans, but now we know what the construction the seasons are going to look like. We can work and work on those plans more diligently and get them in place. And you need to stay tuned. There will be future meetings like this one, which will deal with traffic plans, parking plan, mobility plans, transportation plans, and a marketing plan, because we still want people to know that Main Street is open, that it's vital, and it's a great place to visit. None of those, of course, mean anything without a good communication plan. We've got to make sure we reach out in a proper way and exhaust all possibilities to talk to visitors, residents, business, anyone who's impacted by Main Street. And so a communication plan is also going to be key. One of the things we also recognized was with new green space, there's got to be an increased commitment to maintenance. It requires more to take care of this. We have new stuff. And funding streams are being prepared to supply that, to fund the maintenance that will be necessary for the new parts. Next slide, please. Whenever you go through something like the disruption of a kitchen remodeling or new floor, you keep the benefits in mind. What's going to come out of the other end? And by 2023, when all this is done, Main Street will be improved, and it will operate and flow better as the infrastructure is brought up to current standards. Main Street will be safer because these new changes will mitigate the existing fire safety hazards and enhance driving and pedestrian safety. Our environment will be a little bit protected a little bit better with our infiltration system that keeps salt and point pollution, mitigates that impact of those things in Mirror Lake. We will maintain the perception and the reality that Main Street's a great place to visit. It's a place where people want to return to. It's a very special treat, a very special street, and a very special treat to walk down that street, and it will become even better because it will be more accessible, and at the same time we'll maintain the character of the town. And this project with the village board support is going to be done in a financially and fiscally responsible way. And so if we go to the next slide, this is my favorite slide because I believe it's blank, which means my job is done. And I am now going to turn the microphone over to Mary Jane Lawrence, who I believe has some questions, and will introduce the panel that will take those questions. And I believe there's a way you can, Mary Jane, you can explain how people want to add questions, I believe.
Good evening, everybody. I'm MJ Lawrence, and I'm going to introduce the panel this evening that's going to be answering questions. We do have some questions in the chat. So, of course, you've already been introduced to Mayor Randall and Dean Dietrich, the chairperson for the Development Commission. We also have Brad Hathaway, who's the superintendent of the Department of Public Works for the Village of Lake Placid. And we have Ivan Zdrahal, who is the project engineer. So we have a couple questions. One of the questions was written in prior to the meeting. And the question is, so during the construction, will there be pathways and walkways around the work zones that will be compliant with the New York State DOT requirements and the ADA law? So maybe that would be for you, Brad and Ivan. The question is during the work, during the construction, will there be compliance for ADA, the ADA law?
During construction?
Yeah.
Yes, that's the requirement of the contract is to provide access to all properties over ADA accessible routes.
Okay, excellent. And then who will be responsible for enforcement of these requirements?
The project will have construction inspectors. They will be reporting directly to the village, to the project engineer, to New York State DOT, and they will make sure that the contractor complies with the requirements established in the contract.
Okay. Thank you very much. Also, moving along, the question is there projected overtime for this construction? The question being that, obviously there's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and in hopes to move this project along as quickly as possible, will there be the potential for some overnight workings?
That is probably something that we will be discussing with the contractor once we have our pre-construction meeting. And depending on what the weather is and when we get a start to the project.
Great. Thank you very much, Brad. And I know that, Dean, you said that as far as the parking during the construction, the rerouting of traffic, that's all still being worked out, where residents will park and people that work on Main Street during this construction time. That's to be determined, still in the process of working out those details. Is that correct?
Yes, there will be part of the process before it goes to construction. When the project goes to construction, there will be a pre-construction meeting where the contractor will provide a detailed construction schedule. And based on the construction schedule, we will determine the sequence. So these goals of providing parking spaces can be accomplished.
So just so we understand, once you have this pre-construction meeting where all the details and the timelines are laid out, you'll then, the next step from there is determining the parking and where the residents and employees of Main Street and owners will park and the traffic flow as well. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
We will establish which parking areas will be available.
I see. Yeah. So some parking areas will be available sometimes and others.
Some of course not.
Okay. So thank you. The other question there's a question in regards to the MBT parking lot. So the lower section of the parking lot is going to fill up with cars, and then there's still going to be cars pulling in, trying to find parking spaces where there isn't any. And then, in an effort to get out, the concern is they'll either have to do a 3-point turn, or how will the traffic move through there so that it's not backed up onto Main Street, which kind of is.
Where was that?
So the question is the lower section of the MBT lot, right? So people pull into the lower section of the MBT lot, it's full. There's the potential for cars to be backed up and then all the way down onto the Main Street. Dan, I'm not quite sure where you're going with that one. I mean, it's no different than it is
in the parking lot at MBT on the lower lot, in the main center lot. In this construction plan, there's a one-way in and out. So you should not be having to back up and try to get back out the entrance you came in.
Right, so the MBT lot will be one way in and one way out.
The lower part of it,
The
the
lower
lower part of
the
it,
lower part.
which he's talking about.
Right.
It has one way in and one way out.
Is there a bump out planned in front of Emma's? You know how there's that Grace's Way, that driveway that goes down, there's whole private property down there and it's really hard to get out. Is there going to be a bump out planned around Emma's?
So Shays Market. I'm just trying to think of how I can explain it to you where it would be without the plan right.
Well, here's, does that help you, Brad?
Jason and Sue Zdrahal, if you want to put your contact information in the chat, maybe we can just talk specifically about that with the plans with Brad Hathaway and Ivan, because it seems as if they're also maybe be doing some construction as well on their property. So we'll keep moving. So can we be a little bit more specific when we say summer? What are the dates that there will not be construction? So when will it stop and when will it start again? Or again, will that be determined as we get?
Right now, the months that we have blocked out are July and August.
So July 1 to
That's what,
August?
yes, that's what we're looking.
In the project, our understanding is that there's going to be a complete replacement of the sidewalks. Will they match what's around the lake now, or are they going to be a different surface? What will happen to those sidewalks on Main Street?
It will be different than around the lake.
Do you know what, at this time, has it been determined what it'll be on Main Street as far as the?
We have two proposals. The first proposal is granite paver stones. And then the other alternative is paver stones themselves. We're leaning towards granite, concrete pavers,
Concrete.
but we're leaning towards granite paver stones.
Just want to make sure that I didn't miss any questions.
There's a question about the dumping of construction material
Is
from
there,
Chris.
who's that from? I'm sorry.
Chris.
Chris is asking about where the construction material will be dumped.
Where will the construction material be?
Right
done?
now, we are working with, is that a question that's on there?
He sent this just to the organizer, salary day.
Okay.
When the Mirror Lake sidewalk and high school retaining wall was being completed, all the construction material was being dumped in the old Lake Placid Club property. This was extremely disruptive and noisy. I hope this project will dump the material at the North Velva DPW yard, not at the LPC and the backyard of homeowners.
The construction debris from the Main Street, the non-regulated waste, concrete, pavers, bricks, asphalt's being dumped at our sand pit across from the ski jumps. We've been permitted to reclaim the mine with the material.
Does anybody see any other questions that I may have missed?
One more question, where will the construction start?
When will it start?
Where?
Or where will the construction start?
What end?
Construction start, I think that's another question once we're down, sit down with the contractor, let them get their schedule together and come up with the best plan, and then we can review it.
As early as possible in the spring.
So what
Where?
we're understanding, we're trying to start as early as possible in the spring, but
Yeah.
again, that will laid out when we get the detailed construction schedule. And then are you planning on any prolonged water shutoffs or boil water orders
No,
during this?
no.
So no worry about not having.
Well,
water.
there will be times when you're doing connections, hookovers, but the new water main will have to go in, be tested, disinfected, and then it will have to be put in service, and then the connections will be done. There will be times when individual buildings will be without water, but I do not believe there will be any prolonged water outages,
That's good.
or at least we hope there would be no prolonged water outage.
Okay. Ladies, anything else that you see?
There was one other question about overtime, whether or not the construction project would include any overtime.
I think we did ask that already. Thank you. We talked about the working at night and there
Yes.
would be overtime in the budget. That was answered. that will again be part of the,
Once we have our pre-construction meeting and they put their schedule together, we will discuss, there's aspects that can possibly be done at night. Ivan and I both are not in favor of any major like water line work and stuff like that at night, because I need all my people here if something did happen to alleviate having a water problem. So there will be aspects that we can talk about having night work, but we don't know until we have a contractor to schedule to work with.
one of the questions is, do we have a financial breakdown of the project? How much was funded by the state grants and how much will be funded otherwise?
I believe the mayor has that.
I can
Mayor
comment.
Randall?
I can comment on that. And the funding is, the project is fully funded at the present time through the resources of the Environmental Facilities Corporation of New York State. A significant portion of the project is funded by grant sources, which are monies that are provided for the project that are not repaid. And the remainder that is not covered by grant funding, which is slightly more than, is about 50% at the present moment at least, is a very long-term interest-free loan financing through the Environmental Facilities Corporation. This project is complicated by having multiple applications. We have a water line involved, we have stormwater, we have Main Street, and we have sidewalk. There's a number of different pieces, but the portion that associates with the water line will affect will be absorbed in our water department budgets. The other portions will, of course, will be funded from our general fund. I would hasten to point out that about 2 years ago, our then treasurer took particular steps to start positioning the village so that the debt service from this particular funding would be accommodated without having a dramatic impact on the overall budget plans of the village.
Thank you. Is the small parking lot right across from Emma's? So if you're facing Starbucks, the small one to the left, will that still be
Yes,
there? Where that parking lot will stay?
yes.
Okay. I don't see any additional questions coming in at this time. If you do have additional questions, where can we send them to? Would that be, Kate, is there a place on the village website or an info app or?
Yes, we will get to that. We will set something up for people to send questions to so they can get it.
Okay, so is there any update on the art component on Main Street? The proposed statues, or is that on hold at this point?
Art component.
Well, there is no real art component. One of the things we talked about was there would be an opportunity to perhaps have displays, artistic displays in the bump outs. And we can envision, one display, high school students, as you walk up and down, you see 20 high school students talking about writing an essay about how nice it is to live here. One of the things that the Development Commission did is we created, and it is up and running. It's called the Arts Alliance, and it's a member of the main institutions that have to do with arts, main stakeholders, and they've been looking at this and moving forward with making plans for murals, for making plans for incorporating art on Main Street. But at this point in time, we know it's an opportunity that can be taken advantage of. How we're going to take advantage of that opportunity, is going to be up to the Arts Alliance as they move forward. But it is exciting because one of the areas of tourism that we wish to tap into is art tourism. A lot of people do travel nowadays to look at culture and expressive culture. So we're going to tap into that. It seems to be another one of those to be determined, but it's moving forward.
Okay. Any other questions?
There is another question. How will they be able to plow around the bump outs?
You know, the same way that we do it now, we'll have to sweep it off the sidewalks into the parking lanes and then sweep it or plow it out of the parking lanes to the center of the road like we do now. It's going to be a little more complicated, a little more time consuming, but basically the same principle that we do now.
So we have another, if we sprinkler every building on Main Street after the new lines go in, will we have the capacity for new growth on Main Street? I don't really understand that question to somebody. If we have new sprinkler systems on all the buildings, will we have the capacity for new growth on Main Street?
And I guess the only thing I can say is we're not really changing the square footage of Main Street. So if we have the sprinkler for the square footage, we have the sprinkler for the square footage. I don't understand the question, but the square footage doesn't change. The sprinkler capacity to reach that square footage does change. So I think Main Street growth is more intensive growth, but not in terms of square footage. And the sprinkler system is a square footage type of thing. I hope I'm interpreting the question correctly.
When is the project expected to break ground? And again, that's to be determined as early as possible.
Yes.
Is that right? But we have to go through that preliminary.
Yeah, we hope to, whenever the weather cooperates with us, that we will start as early as possible this spring.
And of course, the details of what greenery and what trees, all of that is to be, you're not there yet. Those final pieces are still being worked out. Is that correct?
The green trees and everything that's being planted, is that all worked out?
It's all, it's part of the contract plans and it's included in the contract price right now.
And I would add the.
I'm sorry. You said it's included in the contract plans?
The proposed landscape, the plant species, the ground covers and composition.
So they're asking what kind?
It's all designed and it's part of the contract price.
Right, so they're not asking how much, they're asking what kind of greenery is being proposed.
What kind of trees and what kind, you'd have to have your plan.
We're not there yet,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I would say that the appearance committee has weighed in on that, and I don't recall exactly the species either, but I know there were certain criteria that the appearance committee wanted in terms of hardiness, salt, resiliency, in terms of height restrictions, so you didn't deal with the architecture. And we passed those concerns along to the engineer. I'm not sure exactly what the species are, but the species chosen are supposed to meet the criteria that the appearance committee kind of dealt with.
Yeah, there are certainly species which are tolerant to this climate and also exposure to salt.
How many loading zones will be able to fit large food truck deliveries? Brad?
I without the plan right here, they're basically the same size as what's there now. So
They're the same size as the ones that are here now is the answer. And then will the construction have an impact of the 2023 games? I guess the question is, will the construction won't impact traffic during the 2023 games? Is that correct?
That would be correct. And keep in mind that the 2023 games currently will be scheduled in the wintertime when there would be no construction underway, and presumably we would be leaving the conditions in a manner that is compatible with the planning that's going on for the 2023 games right now.
One more question came in privately. There's been talk of the parking lots and drawings done by the Edgecombe firm. Are we ready to discuss whether those will be used to improve parking inventory?
Those are not a part of the Main Street reconstruction project. That's a separate project that if in fact we're able to work out the details, and we have a subcommittee working on that as we speak. The plan would then be released to the community. It seems a little bit premature until we're sure that we can actually build what we're proposing. However, if that were to happen, that would add 80 to 90 parking spaces to what we currently are representing. That actually would be the ultimate benefit to the north end of Main Street and would help to mitigate the change that we saw in the current Main Street plan.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do you have anything? Anita?
I don't.
Randy, did you say anything?
I think we should encourage people to keep submitting their questions as they occur.
Yeah, the question is where should they submit it?
Right.
I have no problem if they get the office number or my cell phone number, if people want to call me directly.
Email you, Brad, or would you?
What was that?
Would you rather an email or?
I would rather, personally, I would rather have somebody call me.
All right.
Let me explain it to them.
What number would you like to share for?
It's 518-524-2509.
2509?
Yep.
Okay. I'm putting Brad Hathaway's cell phone in the chat. He's brave. For any additional questions. One last question. Are the parking lots expected to increase along Main Street because of this project?
The parking lot numbers will not.
Parking rates. the
Parking
cost of
rates?
Parking rates.
That's different.
It's unrelated to the project. The rates are generally set by the village board based upon I would say at this point that it would be based upon the needs as the board determines them to continue to maintain reasonable parking facility on the street and in the lots for our residents and visitors. It's not a function that's tied to the reconstruction project per se.
So the rates are not
No.
related. Okay. So, Brad,
Yep.
I gave your number to one person. Sorry, now it's going to everyone.
You know, it might be better to do email, just so because
I'm
people
gonna-
may be asking questions that others might want to know the answers to. So if you email, then it can become more knowledge for more people.
Well, I put Brad's cell phone in there, so. I guess soon you'll have an info app that you can share.
Yes.
All right. I think at this point, that's the end of the presentation. Again, the village will be providing an email for questions, and this is the first of many meetings that we'll have, community meetings in regards to this Main Street construction. As you probably heard this evening, we're still working out many of the details. The village has worked diligently on this project, and we're excited to move it forward. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining the meeting tonight, community members.
Stay safe.
Stay safe, stay healthy, wear a mask.
Went out.